on this episode of Indiana Education Insight.
We want to talk about what is the end goal, what is the success of your environment looks like, and let's reverse engineer this thing. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan.
Yeah.
Every week, the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents is taking you inside today's Indiana education collaboration and tomorrow's education trends. We're staying on the pulse of public school innovators throughout Indiana and beyond. Join our conversation and contribute to our upcoming topics at iapssin.org/podcast. Here's your host, Dr. J.T. Koopman.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Indiana Education Insight. I'm Dr. J.T. Koopman, Executive Director of the IPSS. This podcast is being delivered by our IPSS team and produced by our friends at Edge Media Studios. As Executive Director of IPSS, I'm excited to bring you this weekly show where we feature Indiana education innovators from all over our great state, from students to superintendents, and we'll also be talking to higher education leaders and educators at the state level as we work together to be proactive publication education advocates. That's why IPSS is here and why we're proud to bring you this show. Every week, we're talking about trending topics in the public education space while bringing in Indiana education innovators to hear their perspective. As with any organization, it takes great leadership to be successful. And that is one of the main missions of IPSS, developing great school district leaders. It is always great to have experienced and passionate educators joining us on this show. So let's get started with today's conversation.
Topics and trends in Indiana education.
Today's guests are Mr. Greg Simmons and Mr. Joe Ignatius, IT experts with Matrix Integration. Joe and Greg have made several presentations as well as numerous public speaking engagements. So they have been instrumental in shaping the conversation about Indiana public schools. And they have the ability to look at education from various lenses, which is very important. Of course, they have been tremendous assets to public education in the state of Indiana. Let's find out how they view the issues in Indiana public schools. Welcome, Mr. Simmons and Mr. Ignatius. We are thrilled to have you join us on today's podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Thanks.
So, if you would please tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and your various roles and how you became involved in the IT world and with Matrix Integration.
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having us here today. Again, my name is Joe Ignatius. A little bit about myself, born and raised in Chicago, have a BS in computer engineering, so I'm kind of like that left side of the brain, techie type of guy. And other side of me, I love mentoring. So being involved with the K-12 education technology scene was just a natural fit. So I've been in Indiana now for 4 years, been at Matrix for a little bit over a year now, and it's been a great ride affecting the K-12 tech scene throughout the state.
Good. It's good to have you in Indiana.
Yeah, it's good.
Good to have you involved in Indiana public schools.
Absolutely.
Greg, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Evansville, Indiana, and currently living in Jasper, Indiana, where Matrix Integration is headquartered. I've actually been with Matrix for the last 6 years, almost 7 years, and have worked primarily in the public sector space, supporting school districts throughout the state of Indiana as well as local government entities. But as my time has progressed here, there's been a paradigm shift in my thinking about the approach to market, right? Because we're client executives. Another euphemism for sales rep, right? And
I like client executive.
Yeah, absolutely, right. But the paradigm shift there, it went from I have product, you have money, I want to exchange the two, right? To how do we help you succeed, and how do we impact your students and your teachers?
Okay, all right. Well, Matrix is big on culture, and you have some great people in your organization. So how is your approach different from other organizations?
Yeah. So what's fantastic about Matrix Integration is our approach to the market, right? You heard Joe Ignatius mention, he likes to support by mentoring as well. He does a great job with that. He's very active in his local communities. And then from my perspective as well, I'm also an IHSAA umpire. We like to give back to our communities. And there's a lot of folks within Matrix that aren't here today on this podcast that do a lot for their respective communities. And it's fantastic. The other piece to that I mentioned, about the paradigm shift, from I have product, you have money, I want to exchange the two, right, to helping the students and the teachers succeed, is that with me personally, it goes deeper than just working with the community, with the K-12 community, but it runs pretty deep. Like my wife is a kindergarten teacher. My sister is an assistant principal. I have a cousin that's a high school principal. I have another cousin that's a superintendent. And I have several aunts, uncles, and other relatives and friends that are all educators. So
you're the outcast.
I am the outcast. You're right, absolutely. And but it is funny though how the conversation has shifted around the Thanksgiving Day table. Me being that outcast, right? Now I'm the center of the conversation. It's how are you seeing the school corporations use 1-to-1 in the primary grades, and how are you seeing the effects of whether it be an iPad or a Chromebook, down in the kindergarten level? Do we need touchscreen? Do we not need touchscreen? What are your thoughts on that, Greg? And it's pretty funny. It's pretty awesome. But back to the way that why we're different, right? Is I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, start with why, right? Yep. And that's something that at Matrix we have. We've drank the pitcher. It's all about why we do what we do, right? Mm-hmm. Because our market technology has simply become a commodity, right? I mean, you can buy a switch that does relatively the same thing for relatively the same price, and from a reseller that provides relatively the same services and benefits, right? So why in the world would you buy from Matrix Integration, right? And it's because, frankly, we don't care if we sell you a switch or a server or a laptop or an access point or a smart board or whatever, right? We don't care. Because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is make it easier and more efficient for your teachers to teach and your students to learn. Selling you something is a byproduct for doing why we do what we do.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of it, right? Because there are some people out there that will approach the market with the idea, or the attitude rather, of what are you going to buy from me today?
Yep.
Right? Which is even, in my opinion, which is even worse than what can I sell you?
Right.
Yep.
And I just, Greg makes a great point, and you talk about the leadership from the public schools. This starts with Matrix 40 years ago from the top down. Brenda Stallin. So we're a local Hoosier WBE company here in the state of Indiana. Been doing business for the 40 past years, and not too many companies. I came from a competitor before coming over to Matrix, and our 3 core values is lead with positivity, do the right thing, and commit to excellence. Not too many corporate initiatives center around those, and again, that's from the top down, and we approach that from a day-to-day with our school districts and clients across the state.
Sure. And one of the things that you kind of hit on there a little bit, Joe, that I would like to expand on, if I may, is that this is a woman-owned business in a small town in southern Indiana. So how in the world have you gotten to the point where you are now to expand beyond the town boundaries of Jasper, Indiana, to be all over the state of Indiana?
Yeah, I think Greg, he'll hit on it, not only living in Jasper and being a part of the Matrix culture longer than I have, but I was shocked to know that Matrix has evolved from a music sound store to a Radio Shack, and just the history, which Greg probably touched on better. But I never even heard of Jasper, Indiana prior to moving here. And once I came a part of the family and made trips down there, you'll even see the town culture and how that's embedded in Matrix as well, from the German hardworking standpoint as well. But
Yeah, so as he was mentioned, Brenda Stallings, the owner of our company, she there's a long joke that says, we started out selling records and tapes. I mean, it was literally called The Sound of Music was the name of the company that Brenda owned, right? And as time wore on and she saw different business opportunities, she's extremely tenacious, but extremely graceful as well. And she saw these opportunities and took them. And like Joe said, she became a Radio Shack dealer. She started doing voice over IP before it was really even well known. It just it's pretty cool, man. It just the foresight that she had to say there's something here, right?
Yep.
But there again, with Brenda, she'll tell you this. It's all about taking care of the customer, because if you take care of the customer the right way every time, the growth of your business and the growth of your profits will just take care of itself. You know.
Yep. I love the core values that you mentioned also, Joe. I think those are outstanding. So as part of those core values, you have an interest in helping Indiana schools and school districts across the country in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. So based on your experience as a technology provider, how has technology dramatically changed everything that we do?
JT, that's a great question. It's funny looking at the optics of this set today. I mean, we have paper, and then we even have a tablet,
right,
in which we're looking at notes. But that's how it's changed in the classroom as well. I think I saw a study that says 60% of the elementary school kids today will have jobs that aren't even created.
Right. Yep.
And that's due to the influence of technology. So how do we properly train and develop that workforce of tomorrow by the classroom today? And so Matrix Integration, we pride ourselves on our expert technology advice. Obviously, we pride ourselves on the culture, which we alluded to earlier. And I think that's a great mix to offer back to a public service. We're not in the public service, but to a public entity like a school district that has to be responsible of the tax dollars for their community and make sure they're making the right investments. So again, to Greg alluded earlier, it's not about, hey, what can I sell you? That once we sell it to you, it doesn't work in their environment, and they walk away. But Matrix comes, and we come from a position of caring and making sure that we're implementing the right technology. So it's changed dramatically, and Greg and I were even laughing that what we talk about today to next week, some things will probably change. But it's about engaging with a partner and being on that cutting edge and making sure you're aware of the roadmap.
Well, I'm going to go a little off script here in relationship to that. So how do you make a determination about which one of those changes in technology innovations? Because technology changes so fast. So how do you make a determination about where your focus is going to be?
Well, it has a lot to do with your partnerships, right? And, we're fortunate enough that we have some partners out there that actually look at us as the trusted business advisor, right? And that's the ideal scenario, right? Is I have a relationship with some of my districts, from the superintendent, all the way down to some of the network administrators or the tech guys, right? And it's all about an open line of communication. And that's how you make those determinations, right? Is you've got to have the superintendent and you also have to have the IT director on the same page. There are so many districts out there where the administrative staff operates on an island separate from the technology guys, right? Where, I can't tell you if I go to one of the IAPSS events and I'm talking to one of the superintendents that I know, and they'll go, hey, did you talk to so-and-so about this? Because either A, they don't have any interest, or B, they think that's all the IT guy is for, right?
Right.
And that's what I would recommend, is make sure that you reach out to your technology director and establish that relationship, because even though that you have goals as the superintendent, the IT director has goals as well, to help progress the school from a communication or from a technology standpoint. And sometimes those goals don't align.
Right.
And they definitely have to make sure that you guys succeed.
Well, and I think that the superintendent establishes the vision for the school district. But if that vision isn't well communicated and then ultimately implemented with fidelity, it'll never work. And so it's up to the IT people, if that's part of the integration of technology into the classroom, to understand what that technology is going to do in the classroom. And
Absolutely.
I think you help our school leaders with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been well, not an emphasis, but I think it's been pertinent in the past. But there's 3 E's that I think one of the superintendents, I coined the phrase from him, but it's the 3 E's, but it's education, exposure, and experience. And right now, it's about offering those students as much of that as we can.
Yep.
And it's no longer just pen and paper and textbooks from the education side, but
Sure.
it's about those maker spaces and those 3D printing and
Yep.
and sending them on culture trips and things like that. Matrix is proud to be an engine for those working with the districts around the state.
And you're talking about 3D printers, and those are some of the changes that we're seeing in today's classrooms. Are there other things that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, the one-to-one's not going anywhere, and for those, if there's anybody out there listening that's not familiar with what one-to-one is, it's, one device per student, but one-to-one's not going anywhere. You're always going to have to be thinking about your refresh cycles. If you're not already one-to-one, you got to be thinking about your implementation for that. Interactive boards, there's all kinds of products out there, and I can name a whole dozen, of different manufacturers out there, but those are huge. We talk about gamification of the classroom. Whenever I was a kid, we had, the Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, and PlayStation and Xbox and all that stuff, right? But it didn't really consume our lives as it does today, right? There are actually diagnosed disorders from kids that played too much video games, right? And that wasn't necessarily prevalent, I guess you could say, whenever I was a kid. And I'm only 32 years old, so it's not that long ago. But where I'm going with that is with the implementation of these, either touchscreen devices or the smart boards or the the interactive whiteboards. You're really seeing teachers have to get creative on how to not only grab a hold of the child's attention, but to keep that child's attention. Yep. So it's all about the integration into the classroom is how we're seeing those changes.
Yep. You had mentioned something in relationship to the one-to-one, and I've seen one-to-one rolled out the right way, and I have seen one-to-one rolled out the wrong way.
Yes.
Any advice that you would give our audience in relationship to one-to-one initiatives?
Yeah, 100%. A bad one-to-one initiative or a bad one-to-one rollout can be a resume-generating event, not only for the technology director, but for the superintendent as well, because there is such a huge capital investment in that. There's a lot of things that you can do right, and I'll leave it up to whomever's out there to deem what's most appropriate for their district. But the first thing you don't want to do is you do not want to focus on what device am I going to put in my students' hands?
Yep.
Because it goes back to that adage of, I don't care if I sell you anything, right? How are you going to use it, right? How is it going to help the teachers teach and the students learn? Because that's the most important thing. Right. So I don't want to get hung up on Lenovo Chromebook, HP Chromebook, whatever Chromebook or iPad or this device or that device. Don't talk about that. The first thing you need to know is you need to get buy-in from your community, right? Make sure that you have support from them. The second thing is you want to make sure that you have the wireless network already established. Not only when I say established, I'm not talking about, we've got internet. No, you've got internet right now for about 50 to 75 devices. You're talking about putting 3,000 devices on your network overnight. Your network's going to fail. Yeah. So you need to make sure that your network is robust and dense enough to support that. And then, the biggest thing right now, too, is you got to make sure that your students and your teachers are trained up not only on how to use the device in the classroom, but how they're going to use it at home, right? And we talk about digital citizenship, and making sure your students and your children are good digital citizens. But it doesn't just start with the kids. It starts with the parents, it starts with the teachers, and it starts with the administrators, right? Because we all know which way it rolls, right? So we gotta make sure that we're teaching these kids not only how to use these devices, but most importantly, how we're teaching these children to use the device the right way.
Yep. Right.
I think of analogies a lot of the times, and two separate analogies I want to bring to the forefront when we're talking about one-to-one and the advice with it. Greg mentioned it earlier, but it's like when you're building a house, you don't start with the roof, you start with the basement. So you start with the foundation. If not, then the house is not going to be sturdy enough to withstand more or less a wind than a sunny day. So that network infrastructure that he talked about, which Matrix prides itself on, is really where we can help with that. And then the second analogy, I think, coined in one of our former presidents, JFK, he said, "You don't work on the roof when it's raining, but you do it when it's sunny." And that's some school districts that they fail to properly plan to sustain that one-to-one program. Some school districts will receive a grant and they'll go out and they'll buy that shiny device, and then they realize why it failed. But if you
Why
go
aren't our
back
test
to
scores
the
up all of a sudden?
Yeah. You know, it's not a magic wand that you wave, but there are steps that you take.
Well, and in our world, you know, I refer to this as backward planning. Is what are your expected outcomes if you implement these programs, and
Absolutely.
then what are the benchmarks you're going to use to make the determination if those outcomes are coming to reality, and then you put the device in place that are going to enhance the opportunities for those outcomes to be a reality.
It's all about the why,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I was going to say JT's approach is exactly like ours almost, that you're looking to come over. But no, we don't want to give the secret sauce to how Matrix approaches it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We want to talk about what is the end goal, what is the success of your environment looks like, and let's reverse engineer this thing. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you need that partner. Some school districts, makeup doesn't look the same. You know, there are some districts in Allen County or Marion County that is much larger than the one in Du Bois County.
Right.
You know, so what are their needs? You know, do you have a tech staff that can help support you? If not, bring in a partner like Matrix to help you design and see that plan through, as well as the larger schools.
And I think that's where you fill the void. Is
Absolutely.
you have that experience, and especially in a smaller district, to help them with those issues that they may not have the capabilities of understanding
Right.
or performing within their own school district. So that's where Matrix, I think, is a very valuable partner.
Yeah, you
to
hit the nail
Indiana
on the
schools.
head. I mean, it's the beauty about matrix integration and the fact that we've been doing this for 40 years, right? And we've been serving K-12 for 40 years, right?
Yep.
Is that 9 times out of 10, whatever initiative that you're working on, 9 times out of 10, we've either helped somebody do that, or we know of a school district that has helped or has actually done that. I'm sorry, that we've either helped them or we know somebody that's done it already.
Yeah.
And the fantastic thing about it, right? It's all about networking.
Yep.
I can introduce you to somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about being in the middle of your conversations. I'm literally just brokering the introduction and then gone.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's a lot of discussion. Joe, you mentioned the shiny object, and the shiny object is not going to get us where we need to go for sure. And then a lot of educators, and especially, unfortunately, our older staff, is this too shall pass. It's the next new initiative that you want me to put in place in my classroom. And so how do we get educators to understand the value of technology in the classroom?
we were talking about this. It's that old adage, right? Old dogs and new tricks, or even you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yep.
Right. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. I mean, the Indiana Department of Education has these grants out there right now. It's called the Summer of E-Learning, and I believe there's 19 school districts, maybe 17 school districts.
That's about right.
That were awarded these grants,
Yeah.
and they put on e-learning conferences, and it's centered solely around the technology in the classroom, or this type of device, or whatever, right? I know, like MSD of Mount Vernon down south, right? They've got their 4Cs conference that's coming up in June, and it's free. It's free to teachers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's very cool, and I mean it's a couple of days of networking, collaboration, and learning, on how to use the stuff in the classroom. I say stuff because technology is so wide.
That kind of reminds me. Greg and I, we were out with some clients at a conference, and we talked to them about, hey, how can the Matrix help your 5-year plan? Can we help you with a 5 to 10-year plan?
Right.
And their responses, they kind of laughed because they said, Joe, our 3-year or 5-year or even a 10-year. Well, they laughed at a 10-year because a 3-year it evolves, it changes, it adapts.
Yep.
But when you're tied to programs like e-learning or COSIN or HEC or IAPSS, and then you have a partner like Matrix, you can vet those things out. It's very difficult in your household, more or less, when you're running a business or a district, to go out for something. I don't even update my Android software until after a free version is after, so they can get all the bugs and patches and fix it up.
Yep.
So same point with new technology that comes out on the street for a district. You don't want to run to it right away. You want to vet it out. And working with our engineers, things like that, they understand the solutions and the long-term implications that it can have on the district.
And I like that approach. I kind of ascribe to that as well. I don't necessarily want to be the first one out of the gate. I'll let somebody else make those mistakes and then benefit from those.
Yep.
In relationship, and you may or may not know the answer to this, where does Indiana and Indiana schools stand in relationship to other parts of the country as it relates to technology?
Well, from a K-12 perspective, specifically, I can't speak to how we compare to other states. But what I can say is that Indiana has been coined the Silicon Prairie, right? You got Silicon Valley out in California, but we've got a lot of big business coming here, and technology is going to be the forefront. And, if we don't start soon with our children, they're going to be behind the 8 ball,
Yeah, Greg makes a great point. I'm heavily trying to, not influence. There's a lot of bigger players in the city that's influencing but I'm trying to be a player in that Silicon Prairie movement. But one thing we talk about is, we got institutions like Rose-Hulman, Purdue, Notre Dame, IU, that is a breeding bed for some of this talent. Sure. The problem is they run out west to Silicon Valley. So it starts again with the K-12 and training these students up and getting them back into the Hoosier mentality and growing here. Start with home again first,
right.
And keeping that talent home side.
Well, for a long time, the thought of high school was to prepare you for college, and then college is supposed to prepare you for the real world, right? Well, nowadays it's not necessarily the case, right? You get people that are leaving right out of high school to go into the workforce and so on and so forth, and they're going to be using that technology, wherever they go.
Sure.
Into the trades and so on and so forth, and the sooner we can get them access to and the skill sets to be successful,
right?
Not just in college, but we're going to prepare them for their life,
right?
And that's the most important thing. The reason why you got into education, JT, is probably not because you wanted to be a superintendent or because you wanted to be an assistant principal or whatever it was. You wanted to help the kids.
Yep.
And as corny or as cheesy as it sounds, you wanted to mold the minds of the future, right? You wanted to make an impact on those students' lives, and the way that we are doing it now is we are making an impact and helping those children be successful through the use of technology, right? And you asked a question earlier, and I think it's pertinent to return to, is why do you think it is important for student superintendents to embrace the change in technology?
Yep.
Is because if you aren't, somebody else is.
Yeah.
And there is an increase in competition between neighboring districts for the enrollment, and we all know the reasons why.
Sure.
But if me personally, I've got a son that's 5 years old and in kindergarten. Those are some of the questions that I'm asking when I'm looking at what school I want my son to attend.
Sure.
Is what are we doing in terms of technology and how are we utilizing it in the classroom, right? And if I've got one option over here that doesn't do anything or does very little, and I've got one over here that's doing a lot, that has seems to be a pretty smooth operation, I'm probably more apt I know because I work in the industry, but I'm probably more apt to select the district that is using more technology in the classroom.
Sure.
JT, I did want to go back and compliment Indiana for, as I alluded to earlier, I'm a Chicago native, so didn't have the pleasure of growing up in the great state of Indiana, but I know that they are thought leaders. So the superintendents that has employed the chief technology officers or the IT directors through across the state, they have done a fantastic job. I think there's a seal called a trusting learning environment that there's only 12 in the nation. Indiana has one of them right there in my great town of Zionsville. And then also there's another consortium of COSIN, which has thought leaders throughout the nation. And the Indiana CTO Clinic is one of the best performing and has personnel on the national level as well to help lead that charge. So we are definitely a force to be reckoned with in the ed tech space.
Yeah, and he brought up COSIN, which is an acronym for Consortium of School Networks. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it is a national organization, and each state has an individual chapter. And what I would urge the superintendents that are listening to this is have your technology leaders get involved with COSIN. And the reason I say that is because these guys, you remember who's who, right, of high school students, right?
Yeah.
COSIN's the who's who of technology leaders. And these guys and gals are the thought leaders, man. They are bringing back to their districts some phenomenal and amazing things that are really pushing their respective districts to the forefront.
Yeah.
You know, he talked about the trusted learning environment, which is something we can get into later, but there's another seal that the technology directors can get, and I would urge again the superintendents to support the technology director that wants this, and it's called the CETL or CETL. It stands for Certified Education Technology Leader, and it's basically a master's degree for technology directors, right? And it is just a phenomenal organization to understand not only what the districts in your state are doing, but what the districts across the country are doing.
Right.
And I mean, and I don't want to make this an advertisement for COSIN, but if anybody that's out there is listening and they have more questions, feel free to contact Joe or myself, and we can get you in the right direction. And again, we don't have any financial gain for pitching COSIN. This is literally just so that you guys know that this is an organization out there that is an incredible network for your technology leaders to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Keith Kruger would love to hear you. So we're going to have to make sure that Keith gets a copy
Yes,
of this.
absolutely.
So he's the president of COSIN, and we were had the good fortune to do our first COSIN IPSS seminar in February. And the past 3 presidents of COSIN are also Indiana CTOs. So we have the great fortune of benefiting from that organization here in Indiana. So if we were going to have superintendents take a look at initiatives, give me 3 things that you would ask superintendents to prioritize in relationship to technology.
The biggest thing right now, I mean, it's the hottest thing since sliced bread, and we talk about the one-to-one initiatives and making sure that the students are using the devices the right way, right? But is the cybersecurity. I mean, there are just so many predators out there nowadays, and we're not just talking about the students' use, but from the educator use as well. What we're looking at is phishing attempts, where the educator may not be educated on the appropriate way to use email, for instance, right? I mean, they get an email and they click on a link and they're providing their password to whomever. I mean, that's the quickest way to get infiltrated, and it's majority of it's user error, So that's the front line. Is cybersecurity would be priority A, number 1 for me. Okay. Joe, what?
Cybersecurity.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. I was going to see if Greg had 3, and I was going to cross-reference my 3 with his, but we're definitely unanimous on the first, which is cybersecurity. Right. 2, I would even take a look. We talked about the shiny objects, but taking a look, peeling back the onion, or lifting the hood and looking at the engine.
Right.
So the infrastructure side, I
Okay.
think there is some.
Would that be the broadband or would it be the equipment?
It would be the equipment, the hardware that's sitting on site. And I think we're off air, but Greg mentioned the word hyperconvergence. So it's there's an old way of doing things from the infrastructure side, and there's a new way. And it's not that cutting edge that we talked about that I want to make sure it's tried and true first.
Sure.
It's been around for a while, and
Yeah.
it's at a price point that school districts that it's effective and efficient for. So so to save budget on the devices and other things for professional development for the teachers, if you lowered your spend on lower cost of ownership type of equipment like a
Yep.
hyperconvergence,
Yep.
I think that would go well with the district. So again, we talked about cybersecurity at one. I would look at infrastructure needs and different ways of doing that
Right.
as
Yep.
two.
Yep.
And then three, Greg, did you have one that's more important than the other?
No, I mean, the one that I would like to draw out is, you've got, budgets being cut basically everywhere, right? So, I mean, the unlimited funds are never,
So funding would be an issue.
Yeah. So what I would also urge you to do is talk to a partner, talk to somebody like a Matrix Integration that can help you do more with less. I mean, your IT director should not be any longer the one that is turning knobs in your data center trying to, hey, I can't get my email to work, that kind of thing. So what I would say is leverage a partner that can offload some of the day-to-day mundane tasks
Right.
of your technology director, so it can free him up to help integrate technology into the classroom. Let somebody like a Matrix, who has been doing it for 40 years, take care of your wireless, take care of your servers.
Let's talk a
Dr.
little bit
JT's
about
closing
cybersecurity,
comments.
Because
Sure.
everybody, business, schools, individuals,
Yep.
are under attack by all these bots out there trying to
Right.
get their information. So how do we protect ourselves, and how do schools protect themselves in relationship to cybersecurity?
So there's a lot that you can do. I mean, there's a lot of trainings out there that you can take. There's companies that you can partner with that will help educate your end users.
Yep.
And if they fail to do something, they can always get more training, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the biggest things that's going on right now, and this is kind of a time-sensitive matter, is the Indiana Department of Education has just launched, and it was announced at the annual COSIN meeting in Indiana just 2 weeks ago, that the Indiana Department of Education has launched a cybersecurity matching grant.
Okay.
And the deadline is June 15th.
Yeah, I think I'm meeting with maybe 10 districts this week,
And I've got several myself.
on that exact topic. But to Greg's point, I think there's a few approaches that you can have when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
In schools specifically. Greg mentioned earlier the digital citizenship. So not only do we have to be keen and aware to how the students are using the
Sure.
devices, but we also talked about phishing on your administrator and staff side as well.
Yeah.
So the digital citizenship is one layer to that. I think the security awareness and training within your walls is another layer of security that you may want to address. And also with that matching grant from the IDOE,
Right.
they're providing some security awareness
Yeah.
platforms also. After that, then you have the technology protection of your firewalls, of what are you doing. Another thing that school districts, it's unfortunate that school districts can't provide to their enterprise customers, which are students, that say a large enterprise can do,
Right.
is like a network access control for your environment. If I bring a device and put it on your network, but you can't even see my device, how could you protect your network from that device? So it's technology out there that we're trying to make more affordable to schools, and that's why I appreciate the Department of Education for Indiana providing a matching grant to help
100%.
those things.
That, which reminds me, it's going to take me in kind of another direction in relationship to the use of technology in school districts by teachers and students. And maybe this is not the correct nomenclature, but I refer it to as open or closed architecture. So how do we make a determination about how open and how big of a access point we're going to allow in relationship to cybersecurity as well as access to information?
I just have a thought on that, Greg. if you
Yeah,
don't
go
mind.
ahead.
It comes from having a conversation with Dan Layton. Dan, if you're listening, hello, from Zionsville. But he's the one of the directors that has the trusted learning environment.
Yep.
And a step further that he even took with his district and his constituents is that we won't even use this application or this platform because if you read the T's and C's of their agreement, they're actually selling our data.
Yep.
And now you just, committed a bunch of audit failures when it comes to all these type of compliances that's out there now. So you really have to take a look, even on a very granular level, what are the applications, what is the technology that we're bringing in to the students in these districts? So
Well, and it even goes beyond like applications. I had a school district that he was kind of laughing, the technology director was, because he got yelled at by a teacher. Can't believe you're not letting me do this, yada yada yada. But it was a biology class. The teacher wanted to put a webcam in the classroom so that it can monitor the behaviors of a class pet. I think it was like a fish or something, right? And they also wanted to put in a Wi-Fi enabled thermometer in the fish tank so that they can make sure that's what it was. It was a fish because they wanted to monitor the fish tank, the water temperature remotely.
Yep.
And the IT director was like, no. What do you mean no? Why can't I put this, what, blah, 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 blah. He goes, you're putting a thermostat or a thermometer, Wi-Fi enabled. All you're doing is creating an opening for somebody to get into our network and really shut us down. I mean, with ransomware and everything else that's going on, the last thing we want to do is open it up. I mean, a lot of people may or may not know that, like when Target got breached, right? When all their stuff got breached, it was breached because of an HVAC vendor. They got through from the heating and air conditioning company, right? So as an insurance salesman would say, you can never have too much insurance. Lock it down, man.
Yep.
Lock it down.
Yep.
There's ways to work around, hey, I can't get on Facebook. Well, how are you using Facebook during the day to help our kids?
Yep.
Right? I mean, let's get real.
Yeah, so many issues out there that relate to technology, and so school districts need to have a strategic plan. So how can matrix integration help school districts develop a strategic plan that deal with all of these issues?
Yeah. So the thing about it is, we talk about being a trusted business advisor, right? And we just urge our partners, to engage us early and often, right? You don't want to bring us in at the 11th hour because we're not going to be able to do really to our expertise as well as you want us to do because you're bringing us in at the 11th hour, right? So engage us early and often so we can have those strategic conversations, right? Because, Mr. or Mrs. IT director has this plan or that plan. Well, how's that lining up with the superintendent's plan, right? How's this going to line up with everybody else's? So that's the main thing is just have that open dialogue. We're not here to see how much money we can take from you or, you know what I mean, spend with us. Because like I said before, we don't care if we sell you anything.
Yeah,
Telling you something's a byproduct.
To that point, Greg makes a great point about not wanting to sell you anything. I know a lot of school districts, they go through a RFP phase or request for proposal to make sure they're providing the lowest cost to their district.
Sure.
And a lot of times, Matrix can even provide a service where we can help you write that RFP. So it's very hard to ask for something you don't know what to ask for. So we can provide our expertise to allow you to put those out, and we won't even bid because of collusion and things like that. But we can make sure you're in a position to succeed, even if it's not towards our bottom line.
Yep.
I was joking with Greg. I said our bottom line is to help you succeed. It's not about the P&Ls. And then also, or you had a point?
Yeah, I just want to throw in there, he was talking about the RFP process, right? I mean, a lot of people don't even know that there are state bid contracts out there, like the Hewlett-Packard quantity purchase agreement, right? It's competitively bid contract. Cisco Systems has a Indiana QPA as well, quantity purchase agreement. I mean, these are competitively bid contracts that void out the reasons that you have to go out to RFP,
Agreed.
which saves everybody
Yep.
a ton of time, a ton of headaches, and you know that these prices are competitively bid.
Right.
You're getting a good deal, and you don't have to go out to bid. I mean, it does satisfy the State Board of Accounts.
And JT, one other differentiator that Matrix has that I don't think a lot of our competitors have is that our VP of Technology, James Aldridge, he actually sat in the seat for many years in that role of what tech directors are doing today.
Yep.
He was a former CTO at a donut school here, and but we can leverage him in even writing those plans. There's one school district right now that he's a brand new CTO into the role, just took over coming in mid-school year, and he needs some guidance. So we can step in and we can even help assist and write those 3-year plans to say, hey, we know you've. It's kind of like a driver's ed, It's like, hey, let's get you going while you're in this seat,
Right.
and then we'll watch you go, and we can help support you through that initiative.
Well, and like another example of that is, we've got another school district where they're wanting to do document imaging. They're literally wanting to take all their paperwork and make it digital, right?
Sure.
That's not a core practice of ours. However, we are assisting with the writing of the RFP.
Yep.
We, conducted interviews with the superintendents and all the major stakeholders, right? And then after we wrote the RFP, they came back to us and said, "Hey, you want to help us select the vendor?" Like, yeah, sure, that's not a problem, right? Because this isn't a core practice of ours, so there's not going to be any kind of conflict of interest or any of that nature, right? So we're literally sitting down as a member of that school district, helping them, select this vendor for them, and that's just something that we do in terms of helping them out. And another thing too that we can do is we can talk about things that people aren't even thinking about right now, like PoE lighting. I mean, that is just. I mean, when I say PoE, I mean I'm talking about power over Ethernet. So I mean, I'm literally talking about getting rid of your incandescent bulbs or your UV bulbs and all that stuff, and we're putting in power over Ethernet lighting, which is just it's just unbelievable. I mean, with how crazy this world has become, I mean, you can actually do like 911 lighting, like emergency type lighting that will alert you where, heaven forbid, right, knock on wood, an active shooter or something like that.
Well, there's a new term I learned today. Yeah. So my day is not all for naught.
Well,
so
we did what we came to do.
in closing, what advice would you have for Indiana school district leaders as it relates to technology?
Joe, why don't you lead?
Yeah, my bit of advice is so we touched on a lot of the points already today, but Greg mentioned, I think he said, engage your partners as early as often. Obviously, we're speaking from a matrix perspective, but hopefully you do have trusted partners out there that you can engage as early as often.
Yep.
We talked about some networks that your districts, as superintendents, as well as IT directors, as well as teachers that get involved in, that we would definitely urge them to go after. And then I would think third, in conjunction with that, is listen to podcasts like this, and you can have ideas and how to head the train in the right direction.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you feel like that this podcast is some value, and I just hope that, anybody can listen to the podcast, but I certainly hope our Indiana school district leaders take advantage of that.
And there's, and speaking of podcasts, it doesn't compete with the IAPSS because it's specifically tailored to education technology. One that I would recommend is as a podcast out there. It's called Control Alt Delete. And it's like just like how you would restart your computer, right? Control Alt Delete. This is Control Alt Delete, and it's actually based out of MSD of Mount Vernon, again down in Mount Vernon, Indiana. And the host there is the technology director for MSD, and then you've got technology specialists from MSD of North Posey that host that show, and they just do a fantastic job of breaking things down. But what I would the advice that I would have is don't go it alone. Okay, you don't need to recreate the wheel. The key to success, right, is emulation.
Yeah.
That was something my dad always taught me was the key to success is emulation. So, engage your partners, engage your communities, ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and, just ask for help.
Yep, I agree.
We're here
with
to
you.
serve. We're here to serve you.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
that's what it's all about, man. We're here to serve you, and help those students, help those teachers.
Well, I certainly want to thank Mr. Greg Simmons and Mr. Joe Ignatius, Matrix Integration, for being our guest on today's IPSS edition of the Indiana Education Insight. We gained a lot of insight from you today, and I want to thank you for your helpful and visionary comments about what we can do with Indiana education and technology in the state of Indiana. So now it's time to wrap up this episode with my take on the current state of affairs in Indiana education. And so I'm going to provide some comments as I see some things moving forward with how we do education in the state of Indiana. And although you pointed out that accountability is still important, but there are many factors that go into preparing all students to become lifelong learners and contributors in the 21st century. As such, we need to begin to change the dialogue in Indiana education. We discussed the need for strategic planning, for technology, integration into schools, and this requires a significant bandwidth, which costs money. But with so much emphasis on testing that is truly meaningless, isn't it time for us to change the dialogue in Indiana education? Through this public dialogue, it is my hope that we can get our legislators and our state leaders to see the value of public schools and the nexus of promoting public schools and economic development in the state of Indiana. I see these as investments in our children and in our state, not as an expenditure. Perhaps we can pursue this issue and others in another segment of Indiana Education Insight. On our next show, which is going to be May 21st, we welcome Mrs. Susan Miles, the Vice President of the Riley Children's Hospital Foundation. Perhaps she can provide some additional insight into the State House and in education. Join us for that and more on the next Insight into Indiana Education. Thanks for being a part of education. Please stand up for Indiana Public Schools.